Halloween. We are in the Balcony Sports Lounge upstairs at the restaurant 200 North Beach in downtown Bay St. Louis, looking out over the beautiful St. Louis Harbor here. And it is a Chamber of Commerce day. I tell you, I think I'm just going to stay here and do all my work this week. It's a big week of football in Louisiana, but hard to leave this setting. And we are very excited to be back at the Balcony Sports Lounge. Got a lot to talk about tonight, an action-packed show. I just got back from Minneapolis from the Saints game yesterday up at US Bank Stadium. Saints, of course, won a big game. They 6 straight wins for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, who
and
that?
Yeah, right now, I tell you, it's been an incredible start for all the teams here. Of course, LSU, huge game this week against Alabama, and the Saints rolling as well. But before we get into the talk of football, I want to talk a little bit about 200 North Beach and also about the Balcony Sports Lounge. And we're very pleased to be joined by a special guest, Chef Keith Becton, who was kind enough to sit in with us for a few minutes and tell us about some of the nice offerings here. Because I tell you, one of my favorite things about coming and doing the podcast here is after we get done, I get to go downstairs and try out some of the different things on your menu. And I've tried something new every week, but I can't get past up here the great chicken wings that you have. It's hard for me to get past that because they're so good up here at the Balcony Sports Lounge. But what have you got going this week? Because you were kind of giving me a little bit of intel into the menu.
Right. Well, I try to kind of change up a little bit with the menu that we have up here. Just give a little bit of the local flavors that we have available. One thing that kind of has caught on, you're talking about the wings, because I do, we smoke. I do a house smoke of the wings first, then we finish them. Traditional buffalo style hurricane hunter sauce. So very fortunate to have a smoker at my disposal. So I do also use that to smoke my own tuna dip. I do as much as we can in house to keep it, to keep it fresh, keep it different, keep it a little bit unique.
And you have a different. You basically have small plates up here at the Balcony Sports Lounge. Full menu downstairs.
Again, this week we're doing crawfish quesadillas. Pico de gallo and cumin sour cream. Of course, the wings. I have duck pizza. That's
very popular.
That's a very popular dish. So I give the customers what they want.
You play the hits, right? That's what you're supposed to do.
Play the hits. Keep them coming. So yeah, we're doing a small plate. So still kind of it's a little bit of a work in motion as far as like a set menu. So that's right now. For the next few weeks, it's gonna change weekly until we find everything that's gonna kind of get all the kinks out and see what really works up.
Well, last week downstairs I had the tuna. Before that, I had the redfish. I'm trying to hit every Gulf fish that we have.
Yeah.
What else do you have? I assume you have some trout or.
I'll just hit my like you said the top hits. I do a pan-seared ahi tuna with the ginger glaze mushroom risotto. That's one of our most popular dishes. Speckled trout, trout almondine, as well. Do black and red fish. Try to use what is like you said, locally available as far as the Gulf. Redfish, drum. That's really hitting pretty hard now. The mahi as well. Do that with a mango chutney. So like I said the last time, we focus on the freshest fish and the finest cut steaks.
Yeah, well, I tell you, you're making me want to cut the podcast off and go downstairs and eat. I know you've got to get back to the kitchen, but one last question. What's the most labor-intense dish that you have to perform?
I would probably say anything they have to do that comes up the smoker, because, again, the smoker takes time to smoke and do the flavor with it. But we cut all of our steaks in-house and the seafood as well. That's all fresh cut as well. But I would probably say the smoked tuna dip, because that takes a while to smoke the tuna. Then we have to shred and do that with the. I also make the house-made mayonnaise as well. Everything I try to make scratch in-house.
Wow, it all sounds terrific, and I'm going to partake. I can tell you that.
Yeah,
Chef, after the show,
we're going to be ready for you downstairs. Don't you worry.
Yeah, no, we always love to come here. Anybody that's around town here in Bay St. Louis, I think you know the reputation of Chef Keith Becton and 200 North Beach. And the menu is incredible here, and we are going to partake after the show. But we thank you for sitting in. And
appreciate that. I also want to mention that, of course, we have I think we have the best oyster happy hour in the Bay. It's like Monday through now it's 7 days a week, half off on all my oysters. I also do brunch on the weekends as well, Saturday, Sunday brunch. Then we're kicking off here, ladies' night, Halloween night. So we're gonna have some nice offerings as well.
Ladies' night. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
our co-host here might partake in that. Brody Miller. I'm sure he'd be interested in that as well. But those half-off oysters are right up my alley.
Yeah.
Can't get enough of those.
And it's, like I said, we extend it to 7 days a week, 4 until 6 every day. We also have drink specials as well.
Sounds great. All right. Well, thanks for visiting sitting in, and we will see you downstairs after the podcast is over. That was Chef Keith Becton, kind enough to sit in with us.
Go Saints.
We are going to invite in my esteemed co-host tonight, making his Dat Chat debut, and I'm really excited to have Brody Miller here. He's our LSU beat writer at NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Been with us now for, I think you're coming up on your 6-month anniversary, if I've been informed. And, well, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jeff.
I know you're excited about this. You probably couldn't sleep last night.
I'm giddy. You have no idea.
Yeah, nerves being racked. Tell us a little bit for our listeners that aren't, I'm sure they've read all your work, but don't know Brody Miller, the man. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got here, how you found your way here. I know Jennifer's reputation as the best sports editor in the country is what attracted you, but other than that, how'd you end up here and where'd you come from?
How far back do we want to go? Dang.
To the zygote phase, I think.
Well, I mean, I grew up mainly in the southern New Jersey, Philadelphia area, and went to Indiana University, which you like to bring up every chance you can. And
so
then
junior college in Bloomington?
I'm not even giving that a response. And then after college, I went to the Indy Star for a little bit. Then found my way down to Clarion Ledger in Jackson, Mississippi, a little north of here. And after about a year there, Jennifer came calling, and I made my way here to cover LSU for the Times-Picayune. So it's been a crazy few years of moving like 4 times in 2 years. Yeah.
And what's it been like so far, covering LSU? I mean, I'm sure you had some thoughts about what it was going to be like. You jump right into the fray, a surprisingly successful season, everything that's gone with that. What's been your initial impression?
Well, I mean, yeah, like you said, all the predictions this year, they were going to win, 7 games, which was, hey, kind of nice for me. It was a nice ease into the beat. I wasn't going to have too much pressure on me. All of a sudden, they're a top 5 team, and everyone's reading my stuff, so it's bittersweet. But no, it's been fantastic. Jumping into such a shocking season, and I mean, it's been a blast. Baton Rouge is awesome. Living in Louisiana has been. It's a different experience in mainly good ways, and no, it's everything about it has been pretty perfect so far. No complaints.
Real quick before we get into some of this previewing this big game this week, Tiger Stadium. I'm sure you also had some thoughts about that. What has been your impression of that? It has such a great reputation. Has it lived up to the reputation?
Should I get the fans mad and say no just to fire them up more for this weekend?
Just to be controversial. That's what I do as a columnist.
That's the business we're in, yeah. No, I mean, Tiger Stadium is something else. It really is. It's one of those things where you're like, I don't want to get too corny, but it's just it's a treat to walk around it every game and just kind of walk around. It's honestly, I would say Tiger Stadium's at its coolest when it's empty and no one's there yet. And you walk around the field and just looking up, and it's just like, this is something else. Games, though, my favorite was the rainy game Saturday against Mississippi State. It was Tiger Stadium at its best. It was kind of ugly.
It's foggy.
It was foggy, ugly. The crowd was getting crazy when the phones are turned on. You could see it. That was a cool experience.
All right, well, we're going to talk about this big LSU-Alabama game because that is a part of a huge doubleheader in Louisiana, over in New Orleans and Baton Rouge this week. We have, of course, on Saturday, you and I both will be at Tiger Stadium, LSU and Alabama. It's the biggest game in college football. Unbeaten Alabama, top-ranked team in the country, going against number 4 LSU Tigers. And then the next day at the Superdome, we have the unbeaten Los Angeles Rams coming in to play the Saints.
Slow weekend.
What sets up is the biggest game in the NFL so far this season. But before we do get into some of this discussion, I would like to invite people. We did it last week. If you have questions, anybody wants to solicit a question, except Ole Miss. We don't take Ole Miss questions. I think that's been established in the ground rules. Other than that, we will talk about anything. If you do, though, maybe slide one over to Michelle or Jennifer here. Include your name, if you would. That way we can acknowledge who the question's from, especially the snarky ones that be coming from Rod. But let's talk about the Saints real quick because that's the most recent. Absolutely. And I just got back from that game yesterday, and I think it was a very I don't know. It didn't surprise me that the Saints won. It surprised me the way it happened. The defense made these huge plays. They haven't really been doing that all year long. The big turnaround right before halftime, P.J. Williams and Alex Anzalone sandwich Adam Thielen, who's probably been the best receiver in the NFL this year. He was lighting up the Saints in the first half. He makes an uncharacteristic turnover, and the whole game turned around. I mean, here they are up 13-10, getting ready to go in for at least a field goal there. I think they were at the 14-yard line at the time of the turnover, or maybe a touchdown. And then the other thing that's kind of important about that is they were going to get the ball to start the second half, the Vikings. So they had a chance to run out basically the entire first half, add to their lead, and then get the ball back. And instead, not only do they turn it over, and there's a 60-yard return, which, immediately makes up that time that the Saints would have had to extinguish trying to move down the field. The Saints get a touchdown, and the entire momentum, and you could feel it in U.S. Bank Stadium, not only the fan base, but I think the Vikings, their body language just flipped over, and so did the Saints. All of a sudden, they were walking with a little more swagger, and really Minnesota never recovered from that. That was a 20-point run overlapping into the third quarter, and I'm sure you've covered a lot of games before like that, where one play can turn the entire game around, and that game yesterday just flipped on the circumstances of one play.
I mean, yeah, you point out in your column that box score was one of the most confusing box scores you'd look at this year. They were outgained, 400-some to 270, I believe.
Right.
I mean, nothing about that game kind of added up on paper, but it's like you said, just one of those games where one play changes the game. It kind of reminded me of the LSU-Miami game, actually, a little bit, where the numbers do not tell the story of that game at all. You'd never have expected that. But no, it's a weird Saints team when you look at it that way. Your column kind of hit it perfectly, but they're winning on the lines of scrimmage right now, and their secondary is not exactly great, but they're just making those plays when you need to.
Yeah, and I think it's important because I know a lot of Saints fans watch what happens. They see the Saints giving up all these big plays, and they kind of panic, I think, rightfully so, because eventually they're going to run up against somebody that doesn't turn the ball over twice.
Like next week.
Yeah, and this week coming up is going to be a real challenge for their defense. But I think it's important to note that no one in the NFL is really dominant anymore defensively. They played two of the best teams the last few weeks. They played the Minnesota Vikings and the Baltimore Ravens, and they beat both those teams on the road in their own backyard. And the Saints moved the ball on them very easily as well. I think the rules that are slanted so far toward the offense in the NFL, it's hard to play defense in the NFL anymore. You can't hit the quarterback. You can't touch the receivers. So everything plays into people getting open and having big plays downfield. So, yes, P.J. Williams did struggle. I think he's struggling with his confidence right now. But, everyone's got these kind of problems. Everyone's got weak links. And the Saints have, I think, fewer weak links than most teams. They're very good along both lines. They're very healthy right now. I mean, the Minnesota Vikings played without 3 starters on offense and defense. They were missing 6 starters yesterday because of injury. The Saints are missing a few guys, but it's not their key players. Their best players, their core 6 or 7 kind of difference makers are all healthy. And so when they play most of these teams, they have a talent edge that I think is notable. And that's what matters in the NFL when you have these playmakers, these difference makers like Mike Thomas and Alvin Kamara and Cam Jordan. You just outflank people.
So now they're going to the Rams game. I mean, what do you think the key to that game is?
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting, fascinating matchup of offensive gurus.
Yeah.
You have Sean Payton, probably the foremost offensive mind in the league for the past decade, going against the up-and-coming newbie, Sean McVay, who's one of the youngest coaches, I think he's the youngest coach in the NFL.
Yes.
Both these guys are amazing play callers. They're very creative. I've read a lot about Sean McVay. He puts in a lot of new plays every week. And what we saw from Sean Payton last night was fascinating, wasn't it? That first drive, they had 3 quarterbacks on the field for one play. I think Sean called it Bridgewater 11. I've never seen that before in my life, 3 quarterbacks on the same play. Pass play with him. We were waiting on that to happen. Everybody had been scouting the Saints to run the ball when Taysom Hill's in the game. He finally flips the script on everybody, and they throw. I guarantee you Sean Payton's going to have something up his sleeve for the Rams. I feel like last year when the Saints went out to Los Angeles, they kind of got out-coached in that game. I felt like talking to Payton afterwards in the press conference. he knew it. I mean, I think he felt like they didn't have the best game plan. That they had. That's not going to happen this week, I guarantee. I noticed tonight on his coach's show that he does for a local radio station in New Orleans, he's not on the show tonight. He's having General Manager Mickey Loomis sit in, and I think that's because
he's just working so hard.
He's going to be working around the clock. He can't even take a half hour off. He wants to. I really think he's motivated to match wits with Sean McVay because of what happened last year.
I mean, my thing when I look at that game though is, what's the flaw of the Rams right now? If you ask me right now, I don't know if I could tell you what the flaw of the Rams is right now. You know what the flaw of the Saints is. I don't know what the flaw of the Rams is.
I think the only thing I saw yesterday, I watched some of that Packers game before I went to the stadium, and the Packers exposed them a little bit early on. I thought they gave their offensive line all kinds of problems. I mean, they were sacking Goff. I think they had 3 sacks in the first 2 or 3 series. Now, they adjusted quite well, but I think that was a little bit of a wake-up call for the Rams that their offensive line, which has kind of been a patchwork group, that the Saints could expose that a little bit, I think. But they're going to be playing in a hostile environment here in the Superdome. It's going to be amped. It's a late start that gives everybody more time to get prepared, hydrated for the game, as Tiger Stadium is wont to do on Saturday nights. I think it's going to be an electric environment, and I think that could be the 12th man that they need. I mean, I know it's silly sometimes. A lot of people roll their eyes when I write about Tiger Stadium and the lore of Tiger Stadium.
No, it matters.
I think it matters.
Absolutely.
I mean, the Saints, when they get that dome rolling and that crowd gets into it, guys jump off sides, and that's all it takes is a 2nd and 15, can turn the game around. And I've seen it happen over and over. And the way the Saints are playing right now, they're so confident. I think it's going to be very difficult for the Rams. And also think the Saints need the game more. I know that sounds like a silly thing, but they really do. They need this game just to stay even. If they lose and go down 2 games in the one-loss column to the Rams, they're pretty much ceding home field advantage to them in the playoffs.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, they're going to be the front runner for the 2 seed right now. I mean, who else is for a bye? I mean, who else is competing with them for that right now? The Bears, and I'm not really worried about the Bears in that slot either.
No, it's kind of a 2-team race.
Yeah.
And for that, and I would say this. I mean, having gone to a game out in L.A., they don't have a huge home field advantage.
They do not.
I mean, that game yesterday between the Packers and the Rams was not much of a home field advantage for the Packers for the Rams in that game. So I think that if you're going to have to go on the road and play an NFC Championship game, we're already getting way ahead of ourselves here. We're not even halfway through the season. That's not a bad place to play. You'd much rather play in Los Angeles than, say, Green Bay or somewhere.
Oh, absolutely.
In the middle of a snowstorm or something like that. Okay, we have a question from our Facebook Live feed, which is always great to get questions. This is from Mark Lorando. I think I've heard of him before. He asked, when is Patrick Robinson eligible to come off IR? Well, that's a good question, Mark, and is actually the way the new IR is set up right now, he could be eligible to come off in week 10. And so that'll be a decision that the Saints have to make. I don't know how healthy he is. That's the thing. We don't know how severe his injury was. But I guarantee you if there's any way he can come back, they're going to bring him back because they're missing him greatly right now in the slot. That's what P.J. Williams is playing. He's the best they have in the slot. And I know a lot of people get confused on why King Crawley did not play as opposed to P.J. Williams. Well, King Crawley plays outside. He's an outside corner. It's a whole different skill set than someone that plays in the slot.
Especially what you were bringing up earlier about how the rules have changed. That slot position is more important than it's ever been. It's no longer just the third corner where it's just, you put your third best guy there. No, it's its own different world now.
Well, I mean, Mike Thomas, put it this way, Mike Thomas, the Saints' leading receiver, makes most of his catches out of the slot.
Yep.
So, it's a very important position. Excuse me, and I think the Saints are going to try to get Patrick Robinson back if they can.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about LSU. You take over for a second. I'm losing my voice.
No, I got you. You've been doing all the talking. I don't know why. I let you run with it. Yeah, no, so, now we got LSU coming up against Alabama. It's, you can make the argument this is going to be the biggest college football game all season. And not LSU, just all of college football. You got the number 1 versus number 4 team in the country. You're not going to have another all top 5 matchup in the regular season this year. And it's going to be at Tiger Stadium. It's the first team to test Alabama in reality. They've had they've played Louisville and they've played Texas A&M. Hey. I'm not coming at you.
Come on now.
I'm not coming at you. I'm worried about your health right now, Jeff.
That's what happens when you get sick. Lose your voice.
But yeah, I mean, this is the first team to truly test Alabama, and it's an LSU team that has been tested seemingly every week, and they're a little worn down. But luckily, they're coming off a bye week. But in reality, it's two opposite situations right now, where you have one team that is just their players aren't even playing the fourth quarter because they're winning games by 40 points in the fourth quarter, and the other team that is winning every game pretty ugly. I mean, every game, it never looks, besides maybe the Georgia game, none of these games have looked pretty by any means. So now you have these two things meeting in the middle, and I mean, nobody's found a flaw with this Alabama team yet, but now you have an LSU team that, Dave Aranda is one of the smartest defensive minds in all of football. Can he be the one to finally figure out a flaw with this team? I don't know.
Well, I think what's interesting in that game is I hear a lot of hopeful talk to some degree from LSU fans saying, "Oh, Alabama hasn't played anybody," which is true, but they also haven't come close to even.
Exactly.
I mean, they're beating everybody by like 50 points.
Yep.
I think they have the largest point differential in all college football.
Absolutely.
I think they're averaging over 50 points a game. So it's not like they're winning 30-22. I mean, they're blowing the doors off everybody. And like you said, they're sitting their starters in the fourth quarter. We haven't seen this kind of domination in a long time.
Oh, I mean, I think you have to make the argument this is probably Nick Saban's best team ever, right? I mean, I think it's between this and maybe his 2003 LSU team for Nick Saban's best teams, and I think you got to give this Alabama team the edge. He's never had an offense like this. I mean, there have been some defenses that are better than this one, but there's never been a Nick Saban offense as good as this one. And like you were saying, it goes the fact they haven't played anyone goes both ways because they're beating teams this bad, and their coaches have not had to really come up with any creative stuff yet. They have not had to dig deep into in their back pocket for one of their best game plans yet. So we don't even know what this team looks like when the staff is tuned in, when all these guys are doing everything they can. We have no idea. So we don't even know what their ceiling is yet. They might beat LSU by 30 points and no one has any idea. I mean, everyone I've talked to at LSU, it's like, hey, what flaw is there? What thing could you possibly point out? And they all say, this defense is complete on all three levels. I cannot find a single flaw in that defense. Tua is as good a quarterback as you're going to find in college football. I don't know what thing you point out. I just don't.
Well, they certainly don't point out coaching because we know they got the best coaching staff.
Yes.
They've got like 20 coaches, all these analysts, former head coaches on the staff. That's all they do is analyze the game and give a game plan to the current coaching staff. It's a very unique situation that Alabama has. But I'll say this. I mean, all the years I've covered LSU in this game against Alabama, I feel like this is the best chance they've had to maybe win.
Really? Even like game of the century in 2011?
Well, that game, yeah, that might be the only one I can think of. But that was at Tuscaloosa. I didn't think they'd win that game.
Absolutely. No, and I don't think this is the most important I can think of that it's felt to LSU. I mean, Ed Orgeron said at his introductory press conference, he's not afraid to admit that at LSU, when beating Alabama is part of the job, and if you don't do that, you're not succeeding here. I mean, this whole season has been about this game. This game is why they doubled the amount of analysts they have on staff. They had 5 analysts. They doubled that number purely because they were embarrassed about the scouting report Alabama had on them, and they said, we need to be able to do that on them, so they doubled their amount of analysts. Dave Aranda has each analyst focusing on one different aspect of this team to try to just figure out every little nuance. I mean, their entire season, despite this brutal schedule, has been about trying to win this game, and I mean, I think they're definitely capable of it. I'm not arguing that. I just don't know if I think they can make it a ball game. I just have a hard time believing anyone can stop Tua so far.
All right, we got a question from our studio audience here, our lively crowd, as always, here at the Balcony Sports Lounge. After last week's rant by the Honorable James Carville, is there any evidence of Alabama or SEC collusion to the penalty on LSU? I knew we were going to get into this.
I love it.
Just trying to stir the pot. You were trying to stir the pot.
Stir it up. Let's go.
So if I can name drop right now, I'm going to name drop. But I did. Oh, that was from Rod. Okay. I had dinner with James Carville last week in Baton Rouge.
You're so cool.
Yeah, and I can tell you he's not gotten over the call about Devin White. If anything else, he's doubled down on his belief that there's collusion. And the word he used to me was there's corrosion in the relationship between the SEC office and Alabama officials. And the way he explained it to me, which I thought was interesting, is that they all go to the same country club in Birmingham. They all go to the same restaurants in Birmingham. And over time, James believes this causes a corrosive effect on the relationships. All of a sudden, your kids are all in the same little league and they're all in the same dance recitals. And after a while, you don't even know it. It's kind of what's the word I'm looking for? You don't even know that you're favoring these people because you're friends with. Yeah, unconscious. I mean, you don't even know it. It just happens. And I beg to differ with James. I challenged him. I actually said to him, well, wasn't this same relationship true? Weren't they going to the same country club when Nick Saban was coaching at LSU and LSU was dominating the SEC? Alabama didn't help him then, and he had no answer for me there. He had no answer.
I mean, I'm not arguing there's a weird trend going on, that there is a history of a lot of players being suspended during the Alabama game or guys kicked out for targeting to miss the first half against Alabama. There is a kind of weird trend going on there.
It's just coincidence?
I would agree it's coincidence because at the end of the day, I mean, I understand his point, and it's an interesting one, and it's worth thinking about. But at the end of the day, there was like a 30-second window where they review that call and decide on it. You really think in that moment they're thinking, when they're looking at this hit, yeah, but my buddy at Alabama, I don't know. I have a hard
work out on the same treadmill at the gym.
Yeah, it's like this split-second decision. I don't think they're like, I got to think about my buddy Jeff back there. I mean, I just don't think it works that way. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm naive.
No, and I don't think in James' defense, I think he believes it happens on a much macro level more than the micro level like that. But I do think there's some truth to that, that they could be a little clubby or cozy.
I mean, there's no denying that Alabama is going to get the SEC's most preferential treatment in some of these situations. Of course, that's
the bell cow franchise,
Absolutely. They're the one that wins championships. I mean, of course, you're going to get the team that gives your conference the best chance at a national championship. You're going to give them a few perks every now and then. But do I think they're kicking opposing players out of game for it? No.
No, and I think it was a bad call, but there's a lot of bad calls over time, and it's just unfortunate timing for LSU. They're going to get Devin White back in the second half. We're talking about missing a player for 30, 35 plays,
yes,
roughly. It's a bad break, but I think Devin White's been on the field when they played Alabama before, and it didn't make a difference. So I'm not discounting his presence, but I do think there was a little overreaction, as James.
But if they lose by one score or something like that because of a play with the linebacker, you're gonna have a column to write on Saturday. I feel sorry for you.
No doubt about it. But there is some good news on the LSU front, right? We heard today from Ed Orgeron at his press conference. I want to get your thoughts on that. But looks like they're going to be healthy for this game, maybe as healthy as they've been all season.
I mean, I could be forgetting someone, but as far as we know, they are, in terms of their starting lineup and whatnot, completely healthy. And I'm sure I'm saying this and someone's going to get hurt at practice as I'm talking. But as far as we know, every starter is in theory healthy. Garrett Brumfield is returning at left guard. He's been out the past 4 games. He's been out since the Louisiana Tech game. I mean, Garrett Brumfield is your most veteran offensive lineman. He's the only guy who's even been here who ever started a game more than 2 years ago. He's your smartest offensive lineman. I mean, Chasen Hines came in as a true freshman, did a lot of good stuff for them, and he's actually, one could argue, maybe a better physical blocker than Garrett Brumfield, but he's a freshman. He's going to make some freshman mistakes. So when you're playing someone like Alabama, you'd rather have that veteran. And then you get Braden Fajoko back on the defensive line after missing the Mississippi State game. I mean, this game couldn't be coming at a better time for LSU in that kind of way. They are pretty healthy right now.
Yeah, and I think that's one more reason to believe that this team has a shot. Now, the 14.5 points was the point spread. Is that right?
It opened at 14.5 and has already gone down to 13.5.
And you wrote a story this week. How long has it been since they were that big an underdog?
The last time they were this big an underdog was 1999 against Florida, Steve Spurrier's Florida team. Yep.
Yeah, I believe I was the beat writer at that time.
I was
the LSU beat writer in 1999. I remember that game, yeah. And I believe that was Jerry DiNardo's last year. I get told I'm old routinely, so it doesn't affect me whatsoever. But
by the way, Florida did cover that spread, by the way. They won by, I believe, 21.
Really?
Yeah.
So, but that was a much worse LSU team than what we're going to see.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about it. In all these years, LSU's had some rough years, but for it to be the year that they're this big of underdogs, to be when you're number 4 team in the country, that's what makes this so bizarre. Not the years when they went 9-3 or 8-4. No, it's when they're 7-1, they're a 14-point underdog. But that just speaks to how good Alabama is.
Well, Ed Orgeron was over in New Orleans last week at the quarterback club. Got a chance to talk to him over there, and he sounded very confident to me. I mean, one of the things he said that I liked to hear, if I were an LSU fan, I would like to hear Ed Orgeron say it in this way. He said, look, we know what we're getting into. We know the challenge. We know how good they are, how well coached they are, how talented they are. You said, but you know what? They haven't played us yet either. And I like that out of him. Like he's got a point. I mean, they haven't played a team as good as LSU. They haven't played in an environment like Tiger Stadium. Alabama is as pedigreed and as battle-tested as any program. They played national title games. But this is going to be a crazy environment on Saturday. I can't imagine what traffic's going to be like. I mean, it's going to be
I'm already getting anxiety thinking about it.
Officials are saying there could be tens of thousands of people, right? Not even at the stadium.
Oh, absolutely.
All around the stadium. It's going to be gridlock. So I do think, the 12th man is going to be in effect.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that moment Ed Ogeron said, we're going to win. He did it again at the press conference today. He was asked a question that did not even have to do with that necessarily, and he said, well, we're going to win. He just said, we're going to win. And Grant Delpit, the star safety is breaking out this year. He was asked the question of, why do you think Tua hasn't thrown any interceptions this year? And he said, well, maybe it's because he hasn't faced any secondaries like us this year. So you are seeing a bit of that, and it's always corny to go down that path and be like, oh, you're seeing a confidence out of them. But you are seeing a sense of there isn't a timidness about facing Alabama. They're not putting Alabama on a pedestal. They think they're better than Alabama. They have 5 top 25 wins. Alabama has 1. They look at it as, we're more battle-tested than Alabama. We've proven ourselves more in Alabama, so we're going to go win. That's how they're viewing it.
Yeah, and look, I would say half the battle when you play Alabama is getting over just the mystique and looking at those crimson uniforms and realizing, oh my God, that's Alabama.
That's challenging.
Yeah, I mean, there's a mystique about that program, and rightfully so. They've earned that, but I don't feel like LSU is going to have that. They're not going to be intimidated the way most programs are when they play Alabama. I really believe that. And guys like Grant Delpit and Greedy Williams and, Rashard Lawrence, I mean, they've gone against these guys and seen that they can compete with them, and now they get them on their home field. I like their chances of being in this game into the fourth quarter, and then it's going to come down to who makes a play.
It's a cowardly hedge.
That's just the way I believe. It's the way I believe. I think it's going to come down. Just trying to be honest.
No, I know. I think one thing that LSU has proven one of their best strengths is that they're good at getting teams to just kind of play ugly. They're good at getting teams to play out of themselves and not how they want to play left-handed. As Bill Belichick's greatest strength, people always say. And I think Dave Aranda's really good at that as a defensive coordinator. So I think if you can get Alabama to play in a way they don't want to, I mean, you're going to be in this game. You have Tiger Stadium. You're pretty good at managing clock. That's one thing Steve Ensminger's done pretty well is, controlling things like that. I mean, they got a chance.
Are they going to be able to move the ball at all against this Alabama defense? That's the thing I'm worried about. I mean, like, if I'm worried. The thing, if I'm an LSU fan, I'd be worried is how they're going to – I mean, Steve Ensminger is going to be challenged here, and Joe Burrow is going to have to avoid mistakes. That's happened in the past sometimes, where they make a mistake, give them a short field. Next thing you know, you're playing uphill. You're trying to play catch-up against Alabama. And that is a recipe for a double-digit loss.
No, you're absolutely right. And that is one of those things that hasn't been brought up that much this week. And, they've kind of steered away from that. But the LSU offensive line has been a weak spot all year. And they're healthy, yeah, absolutely. But even when they were healthy, Miami still had no problem getting pressure on them. It's going to come down to, can you run the ball? I think that's one of the more – I think now that we're 8 games in and we kind of have a bigger sense of things, this team plays well when they can move the ball on the ground. And then when you get 2nd and 5, you can go tempo. I mean, when they have been able to go up tempo, this has been a pretty good offense, actually. Joe Burrow's played well. You get teams off balance. It's when this team cannot get pushed back. If it's 2nd and 12, it's 3rd and 9. That's where they're going to struggle because Joe Burrow's going to have 1 second in the pocket on a drop back, and their pass protection's a weakness. And that's when the receivers are good and they have talent, but they're not, they drop passes, things like that. You can't put yourself in must-need passing down situations. So I think it all comes down to, can that offensive line get a running game push, and that opens everything up. But that's not easy against this Alabama team. You have defensive linemen like Raekwon. I apologize, I'm forgetting his last name off the top of my head. But, I mean, yeah, you got Dylan Moses. You got all these guys. I mean, I just don't know if they're going to be able to get that push.
Well, one thing I do think they have going for them is their kicking game. It's probably the best it's ever been. We all know about Cole Tracy. He's the best kicker maybe LSU's had in the last 10 to 15 years. They've got a great punter. This team is sound in the kicking game, and in a close slugfest of a game, it could be the difference in the game, and that I think does favor LSU.
Absolutely. I mean, and the punting game is the least talked about thing, but that doesn't get talked about enough. Is that on days when their offense is struggling, on days when they're going 3 and out, that punt game can. I mean, Zach Von Rosenberg is a front runner for the Ray Guy Award and whatnot. I mean, this punt game puts teams back at the 15-yard line, despite the fact that sometimes the offense is struggling.
All right, we have another question here. It seems like we have a trend here in our
worried.
question making, but I'm going to go with it because we want to invite as many questions as we can get. This is from our live audience here at the Balcony Sports Lounge. Always a creative group and a little snarky, I would say, as an overall group, which I like. With the governor and James Carville getting vocal on collusion, we're on this collusion trend, and Coach O being the voice of reason, does he have a political career? That's a good question for you.
Coach O for president. Let's start it now. I think we
could Coach O become the governor of Louisiana? I think he could run right now and win.
Hey, they're 7-1. This is the time to strike gold. Absolutely. No, I would vote for Coach O for president. Absolutely. That'd be a fun governor. Absolutely.
We're always supposed to stay out of politics, by the way, here. We're always been told to stay away from politics as sports writers.
Stick to sports.
Stick to sports. Yep. But in this case, I would say Coach O could run for office right now. If he beats Alabama, he would definitely win the governor's race. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think there is something to be said. The fact that he is a Louisiana native, he's a LaRose native, and I think it's working right now. He's got momentum in the program. We know that John Emery, the top running back in the state of Louisiana from Destrehan, decommitted from Georgia this week. It sounds like LSU is going to become his front runner, and it makes a lot of sense. He could probably come in and start at day one.
Yeah.
But if that momentum starts happening and Coach O starts getting these top recruits in this state to stay home, and he can put a fence up around the state per se and keep Alabama out, that could change the fortunes of this rivalry.
Absolutely, and there's no secret of the fact that this 2019 class is very important for Ogeron. And, granted, things are going well this year, but this class was going to matter a lot just for job security and things like that. So having this class look the way it is, and you get Derek Stingley back in the summer, and there was that stretch in July where it seemed like they were getting another recruit every single day. And if you can get the John Emerys of the world and the Devonta Lees and the Ishmael Sopshires, all of a sudden, this is a loaded Louisiana year, absolutely, but when like you were saying, you get momentum, and then all of a sudden it's a bowling ball effect, snowball effect. And if you're winning in Louisiana, you shouldn't be letting anyone out of your state. And some of Alabama's best players are Louisiana natives. You got your Dylan Moseses from Baton Rouge. You have Devonta Smith from Amit.
Yes.
It's just that's got to sting to have the guys that might be beating you on Saturday be Louisiana guys.
Well, the problem is, for a while, frankly, in the tail end of the Les Miles era, they were not a hot program. They were not a cool program. They seemed staid and kind of antiquated in their approach. And I do think that's one thing that Ed Ogeron has turned around a little bit. Certainly defensively, they have one of the top defensive coordinators in the country, one of the top assistant coaches in the country. They are seen as a cutting-edge NFL-style defense. They're not going to have any problem attracting defensive players there. Now can they do it on offense? It's something that you and I talked about last week, right? They could be turning the corner there offensively maybe and upgrading their offensive coaching staff or analysts.
Absolutely. And the tricky thing is, it's hard to judge anything Steve Ensminger's done this year because with those offensive line issues, he can't do most of what he wants to do. And same with Joe Burrow. They have had to change so much of their offense because they have to keep 6 or 7 guys back in pass protection. They can't, be the free-flowing offense that Steve Ensminger originally wanted to build here. But the point is, they have so much talent coming back next year. This offense, nearly everyone, all the key players are coming back. This offense has a chance to be pretty good next year, and you have this really good recruiting class coming in. There's a chance to suddenly make LSU this different brand, right?
Agreed.
It's no longer this, I formation running up the middle. Nick Saban actually talked about in his press conference today that this is a different LSU team than he's ever seen since he's been at Alabama. They're doing things to challenge you. They're doing different personnel packages. It's just a different look. So all of a sudden, LSU can change its brand a bit. You're cool now on offense. Maybe not as cool as Oklahoma or some of these other exciting offenses, but that's a different thing. The fact that they were getting these Odells and Jarvises with that offense is almost kind of surprising and looking back in hindsight. So now you have an offense like this, maybe you get even more of those.
Well, and I don't think there's any doubt that it's not coincidence that Emery decommitted after seeing how LSU played the first half of the year. I think he went to Georgia or committed to Georgia early on because, frankly, he didn't know what to expect from LSU. He's right in their backyard. He ends up committing to Georgia, which was the hot program. They just challenged Alabama in the national title game.
And let's keep in mind, he was in Tiger Stadium when LSU dominated Georgia.
Right, and he saw that. And I think he probably said, look, and I'm sure he looked at the backfield and said, I've got a chance to play right away.
He said on the record that he looked at Georgia's depth chart and said, hey, I mean, there's a lot of good running backs there. I might not be able to play. And he didn't want to riff on any LSU players, but he kind of said, hey, I mean, there's some openings at LSU for running back. There's no doubt about it after striking out on the 2017 and 2018 class for the main guys they wanted. I mean, they're desperate for a running back. I'm surprised it took this long to get some of these guys that are more interested.
Yeah, and I think clearly there's momentum with the LSU program right now. We'll see if they'll carry over with a big upset. It certainly would be the biggest upset LSU's ever had, 14.5-point underdogs at home, playing the top-ranked team in the country. And if they win that game, they're all of a sudden in the national title hunt. They're in the driver's seat in the SEC West. If they lose, I think they're on the outside looking in to get back in the college football playoff with 2 losses.
I just don't. I mean, I would be very shocked if they even are in the running for a college football playoff if they lose this game, just because then that takes away your chance of getting in the SEC championship game. So you have no chance to really catapult yourself back in. I mean, there's always a chance. There's scenarios, but I just don't see that happening, especially when you have. I mean, there's 6 or 7 teams right in the thick of it right now, but I'm interested to see what the college football playoff has them this week. I think they're definitely going to have them in the top 4 this week because, for a lot of reasons, 1, LSU deserves it with their resume, but 2, they probably want that matchup of they want this weekend to be, it's basically like a college football semifinal this week. They probably want that whole narrative. So, but yeah, no, the idea that LSU is even in the college football playoff, just thinking what this team was supposed to be in August. Remember, you wrote your preseason columns predicting 7 wins, I think.
I think it was 7-5. That really, Duncan was all over that prediction. That crystal ball broke about 3 games into the season.
Well, I'm lucky I didn't have to write a preview column because I would have said the same thing. So I can't give you a hard time.
Yeah, that was bad. That was one of the worst preview columns I've ever written as far as results.
But in your defense, everyone wrote that. I mean, you weren't alone on that. Nobody saw this coming.
I pride myself of not being better than everyone else, Brody, so it didn't happen for me there. But let's switch gears. We got a lot of other items to get to before we wrap up the program. First of all, some NFL news today. We're getting ready. In football, the Patriots are playing at the Bills, which shapes up as a one-sided matchup. I think it's a 14-point spread.
14-point, yep.
Patriots are favorite at Buffalo. I'm eager to see how that game plays out. That's a big spread for an NFL game. But some news today, Josh Gordon, the receiver for the Patriots, the one they picked up off the scrap heap from the Cleveland Browns, has already been disciplined. He's going to be, I think, out the first quarter tonight in that game. And then, of course, the Browns made big news today, firing head coach Hugh Jackson, firing their offensive coordinator Todd Haley, and promoting former New Orleans Saints defensive coordinator Greg Williams, interim head coach.
I need to hear your thoughts on this. What are your thoughts on Greg Williams, interim head coach?
Well, I like Greg. I covered him my first year in Nashville, covering the Tennessee Titans. He was the defensive coordinator there, so I go way back with him. I think he's a very good defensive coordinator. I'm not sure he's a great head coach. I think he's a very good defensive coordinator, one of the best in the league. But running a team, especially in this situation, I think it's a big challenge. I think he'll do a good job of kind of rallying the troops, if you will. But this is a big job. I mean, you basically have a startup franchise here in a lot of ways with a rookie quarterback. I think he's going to be the caretaker there, and they'll take care of him. He'll get a raise and be the defense coordinator there probably when they bring in someone like Lincoln Riley or somebody. Because I think they're going to go big. They're going to try to hire somebody with a splash.
And for them to fire him right now, you have to imagine they might have 1 or 2 people in mind, right? That are probably already starting to hunt.
No doubt about it.
And now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I mean, you would have to think the Browns is one of the jobs that people would want the most in the NFL right now. Because one, the expectations aren't that high, but at the same time, there's so much promise there. There's so much talent on that roster right now that's all 22, 23, 24 years old. There's tons of cap room. I mean, there's so much room for this team to become something. I've personally been impressed with Baker Mayfield. I'd want to work there.
Yeah, and you come into a situation where the previous head coach was 3-36 or something like that. So
nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, there's going to be no expectations. I mean, it's a perfect situation. Sean Payton would tell you that's the kind of place you want to go to. I think they're going to get a big name. Yeah. I mean, I think the Haslams made the right move. I mean, Hugh Jackson, I think he's a good example of a guy that's a really good coordinator, not necessarily a great head coach. I'm eager to see it. Look, I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, being a Browns fan. Long-suffering Browns fan.
I'm so sorry.
I lived through the fumble. I lived through the drive, losing to the Denver Broncos. Their fans are a lot like New Orleans Saints fans. Very passionate, have always had historic quarterback issues like the Saints did before Drew Brees walked in the door. So, look, I feel for them, and I think you're right. I mean, I think it's going to be a very attractive job for a lot of people because it's got a lot of potential. I mean, it's a historic franchise they've never even been to the Super Bowl, and they're one of the original NFL franchises. If you can go win there, you basically could turn into the LeBron James of the NFL.
That was going to be my next point. You compare it to New Orleans. Drew Brees is going to be a god here for as long as he lives because of what statues being built the next day. I mean, you're a hero in that town. That's not an easy task, but I mean,
and that's football country. I mean, it's really not traditionally basketball country. So what LeBron there was incredible. It would be that times 10 if somebody resurrects the Browns franchise and they were able to go to the Super Bowl and, heaven forbid, win the Super Bowl. They might tear down the city, but it would be great as someone that's our huge Browns fan.
What about Urban Meyer?
A lot of people speculated that could actually happen. I could see that potentially because he is an Ohio guy. But there's also some ties. You mentioned Sean McVay. That seemed like a weird left field.
The Vegas odds have Sean McVay as the current favorite right now. I don't know where those odds are coming from, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, the Browns, I think, are the first person to make a move, too, the first organization to make a move. So I do think that they, got the head start on the coaching search and that they are going to be actively out there interviewing, going after people. Obviously, coaches that are currently in jobs are not going to be able to get a job interview. But it's smart; you can get a head start on that. One other thing I wanted to mention before we wrap up is Tulane had a nice win this past week, and Justin McMillan, former LSU Tiger, transferred into that program. They made the change at quarterback to go to him. This is a guy that was a talented player from LSU and leads them to a big win against Tulsa and keeps their faint bowl hopes alive. They have to win basically almost every game the rest of the way to get in. But that was a good win, and I think obviously validated the decision by Willie Fritz.
Absolutely. I mean, he's a guy who's a smart player. No one's ever argued that. He's a guy who knows what he's a guy. His stats weren't jumping off the page. I don't know how closely you were able to watch that game, but he just made good decisions. Then he took off up the middle for that game-winning touchdown that decided the game. I mean, he's a guy who I think he probably provides the best balance of what Banks brought you, but also, some intelligence, some good decision-making. And I don't know, and you got another year with him after this. So, I mean, you might as well commit to him now.
Yeah, I definitely think it was a good move by Tulane to go to McMillan. Excuse me, because I'm dying here. But
I would hate to be on the podcast with you and you die all the down history.
It would be terrible, right? But that might salvage their season. We'll see. It was a good win. They had to have it. We'll see. They've got a couple other games here that they can win on the schedule coming up. And I did get a note here from Rod Morris, who's a regular. Could not be here. This is good news. His first grandbaby arrived, so that makes a lot of sense.
Congratulations.
Yeah, should we clap for that? First grandbaby? For Rod, congratulations. And finally, wrapping up a little bit about the Saints game from last night and looking ahead. I can tell you this: in our business, you can usually tell when the big game is coming up because all your colleagues from all over the country start calling you. They want to come into New Orleans. They want to go out to eat. We've got national writers at both games coming in. A lot of people. The spotlight of all of the sports world, or at least the football world, is going to be on South Louisiana coming up this weekend. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I've ever remember there being a weekend this big. I remember there was a couple of years ago when the 49ers were really good under Jim Harbaugh. They came in and played the Saints for a huge game after the Alabama-LSU game. It was very similar, but it wasn't a top 5 matchup like we have with LSU now. I think it's only happened a handful of times in their history, right?
Absolutely. I think it's the 5th time,
yeah. 5th time in history. And the Saints playing an unbeaten Rams team when the Saints are 6-1. I don't think it's ever happened where we've had something quite this big. And it's going to be fascinating to see how the city responds. I think the fans are going to be how many people go to both games, try to do that doubleheader. Yeah. It helps that
you'll be doing it.
I know. It helps it's a 3 o'clock game for the Saints, so you can get out of Tiger Stadium. It might take you that long to get out of there on Saturday night because if they were to win that game, who knows what's going to happen in Baton Rouge. I'm not sure Baton Rouge will recover.
I know. I'm lucky. I'm happy I live a little far outside of downtown, so I'm not too at risk. But I'm curious. I mean, can you think of another time where just Louisiana sports as a whole has been this just, I don't know, exciting?
No, I mean, I was thinking about this at the game last night. I know Breeze didn't have a huge game. He only threw for 120 yards. The fewest yards he's thrown for in a game in his entire Saints career, 13 years. I mean, that's an amazing number, and they still win the game. But I thought, wouldn't it be fascinating if both Anthony Davis and Drew Brees won their respective league MVP awards in the same year? It could happen.
No,
I mean,
you're
they're both
absolutely right.
leading contenders for those
Anthony
awards.
Davis is the front runner, I would say, and then Drew Brees. I mean, it's going to be a tough year for Drew Brees considering Mahomes and all that. But I mean, Brees is right there in the top three.
I think if they continue on and they end up going, 14-2, 13-3, and they have a better record than the Chiefs, I think he'll win it. I really do. I think it's going to come down to who has a better record.
I think you would also agree with this, that these awards, though, tend to come down the narrative. And Patrick Mahomes is the exciting narrative this year. So if Patrick Mahomes keeps doing what he's doing, I don't think anyone's taking that MVP from him.
I do. I think Breeze will if they have a better record. If they fade, like the Chiefs, if they fade as a team, I think it's going to hurt his cause. He's a second-year player. Breeze is a guy, I think there's going to be a lot of people saying, let's give it to him because this is his last chance. It's going to be like an Academy Award, nomination or something. I'm just going to give it to him. Look, he's going to have to be worthy. He's going to have to play well. But I really believe it'll come down to – look, the year that in 2000 – and the Saints finally blinked and lost. The Colts won their next game. They won 14-0, and Peyton Manning got the award. It was basically it just came down to that. Who was going to have the better record?
There's a chance, right? I just think at the end of the day, people like the exciting news story. Whether right or wrong, I'm not saying Mahomes would deserve it more than Breeze. I just think people like the exciting story. It's why LeBron doesn't have 8 MVPs. It's because –
Oh, no doubt. But, I mean, we got 50 people voting on that award. Most of them are Associated Press writers. It's not like it's, a fan. It's, journalists.
True, but that's how the awards tend to go.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm going with Breeze in this one.
And by the way, just to add to that, if LSU keeps doing what they're doing, add Ed Ogeron being Coach of the Year to that the streak of awards you might be seeing in Louisiana this year.
That's a really good point. And he would be deserved considering where they came from. They weren't even ranked. Picked 5th in the SEC West to start the year.
Even if they lose this game, I'm sure he's a candidate for it. Yeah.
No doubt about it. And, look, he's got a huge challenge this week. They've had 2 weeks to prepare. They always have an open date before this game. And he's going against the master, Nick Saban, who I've said, a long time ago that I didn't think LSU would ever beat Alabama as long as Nick Saban's coaching again. I don't think they'll ever beat him again. This might be the one time. Even though I know their team next year should be stacked going down to Tuscaloosa, I just don't know if they can do it. I think this is going to be their best shot to knock them off.
That's a good point. The fact that it's in Tiger Stadium, they might be a better team next year, but in Bryant-Denny, that's a whole different challenge. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
All right, well, look, we want to thank everybody here at the Balcony Sports Lounge. We are going to sign off here in a second.
We're going to
partake in some of the great craft cocktails they have up here. I know you're going to do that, and we're going to try some of those chicken wings. I'm excited to get a little food. I haven't had anything since this morning in Minneapolis. It's hard to believe that I'm still going strong, although I guess you could debate whether I'm going strong.
I don't think you are. I'm worried about it.
I'm sputtering to the finish line.
We're taking Jeff to the hospital the second this is over.
If you do get a chance, you're in Bay St. Louis. I mean, this is an incredible little beach community here, and great area in town that, the reputation of 200 North Beach goes back a long time, and what Jim McPhail is doing here. And by the way, I have to give a shout out to Jim for saving me with the cough drops because I'm not sure I would have gotten through the podcast without that. I just wanted what they've done here upstairs and making this sports lounge. I mean, this is exactly the kind of place you'd want to come. Upscale, very great view overlooking the harbor, and also great flat screen TVs. You got Avery mixing the drinks here. It's just a great place to hang out. You can go outside, enjoy some of the fresh air, come back inside, watch the game. I mean, it really kind of has everything that I would want in a place to watch a game.
I'm coming back, that's for sure.
And before we sign off, Jim did get a question in here that I think is a very valid question. I get asked this a lot. He says, does this team, the New Orleans Saints, remind you of the Super Bowl team in 2009? And I would say in some ways, and you're going to call me, once again, hedging, some ways it does, some ways it doesn't. I think this team is not as explosive as that team offensively. That team, had a lot of weapons with Reggie Bush, Pierre Thomas, Jeremy Shockey, Marcus Colston, Devery Henderson, and Robert Meacham were the deep threats. They were a much better offensive team than this one is. This team is not a dominant offensive team as far as like big playmaking. I know they had the big 62-yard record-breaking touchdown. That was kind of a fluke play. This team is more of a efficient ball control, move the chains. They get so many of their first downs by like a yard. It's amazing. They're a master. 3rd and 4, they get 5 yards. 3rd and 7, they get 8. I mean, they must drive defenses crazy because they're so efficient. But they're not really. I mean, if Mike Thomas were to get hurt, this team would, I think, really struggle offensively because they don't really have a huge perimeter playmaker. And we saw it yesterday. I mean, they had that first drive. They had a 44-yard trick play, if you will, Taysom Hill to Mike Thomas out of the read option look. And then they had that incredible 20-yard catch by Mike Thomas on the first drive. And after that, I think their biggest gain was 17 yards the rest of the game. That's uncharacteristic of the Saints teams we've seen in the past. But I think this team does have a better defensive line than that team did. With Sheldon Rankins, Marcus Davenport, and Cam Jordan, who I think is better than anybody that defense had up front. I think they're better, defensively up front. They're certainly better at stopping the run. I mean, this is a very good run defense. They lead the entire NFL. And then their kicking game, I think, is better. Will Lutz has made 13 field goals in a row. He's 15 of 16 on the year. He's lights out. They have the best punter in the league, I think, or one of the top 2 or 3 punters in Tom Morstead. And I also think Peyton's probably a better coach now. I think he's learned. I think he's coaching as good as I've ever seen him coach. I think he's evolved like we all do in our jobs, and he's just a more mature coach. And the other thing is he's not losing on the sidelines. I mean, I watched him all game last night. Maybe it's because he knows he's got a good team. He's very calm on the sidelines. And I think he knows he's got, a team that can make a deep playoff run. They've got to stay healthy. They can't lose Cam Jordan. They can't lose Mike Thomas. They can't lose Terron Armstead. I mean, there's certain indispensable players that this team, and they can't lose Drew Brees. We know that. But if they did, I think they could still maybe win a few games with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. That is, they are better at quarterback than they've ever been. With Bridgewater, Taysom Hill, and Drew Brees, it's by far the best quarterback depth chart they've ever had. So I don't know if that answers your question. They got to certainly. I think that Saints team in 2009 was 13-0. I think they were one of 7 teams in the history of the NFL to start 13-0. So that was a special team, and they were winning their games by 20 points almost every night. This team hasn't been that dominant. They're not going to be that kind of dominant team, but I do think there's a lot of mental toughness and physical toughness to this team that is encouraging if you're a Saints fan. All right, well, let's wrap it up. Let's get on with some food and some drinks and get a chance to mingle with everybody in the crowd. And once again, I want to invite everybody back out to the Balcony Sports Lounge. Every Monday night we're here from 6 to 7, and we have a great time here. I hope you can come out and join us. And we'll be available, by the way, on Spreaker, this podcast. You can always download it on SoundCloud. It's on iTunes. You can find it on Spotify. It's always up at NOLA.com as well. So if you want to download it, that's all the different platforms. We'll have it posted again tomorrow morning. We'll have another podcast on Thursday, and then we'll be back here once again at the Balcony Sports Lounge in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, signing off for the Dat Chat, episode 13. Take care.